the tremor started in my fingertips, a barely perceptible vibration that quickly spread through my entire arm, then coiled low in my stomach. It wasn't a chill, not exactly. More like an electric current, a quiet hum that settled deep in my bones the moment Daniel's hand, calloused and warm from an afternoon spent wrestling with a stubborn garden hose, brushed mine. We were reaching for the same lemon on the kitchen counter, an innocent enough gesture, yet the air between us crackled with something entirely new, entirely dangerous. My breath snagged, and for a fleeting instant, the bustling kitchen, the scent of evening basil, even the distant sounds of Mark's television, all faded into a suspended animation. Only Daniel's eyes, dark and suddenly intense, held mine. In that prolonged beat, a boundary I hadn't even known existed shimmered, then dissolved. "Sorry," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through me, not just my ears. He pulled his hand back, gripping the lemon, but his eyes, those deep, knowing eyes, refused to release me. A warmth bloomed in my cheeks, a blush I knew was entirely unwarranted and yet utterly unavoidable. This was the precise moment I understood, with a sickening lurch, that Daniel, my husband's younger brother, was no longer just family. He was a force, an undeniable presence that had quietly, subtly, rooted itself in the landscape of my life, threatening to reshape everything. It had been 3 months since Daniel arrived at our doorstep, a shadow of the boisterous man he usually was. His marriage, a passionate but volatile affair, had finally fractured, leaving him adrift. Mark, ever the dutiful older brother, had insisted he come stay with us. "Just until he gets back on his feet, Amelia," he'd said, his brow furrowed with concern. "He needs family right now." I agreed, of course. My heart went out to Daniel. He looked lost, his usual spark dulled by a weariness that seemed to cling to him like a second skin. Our house, a sprawling Victorian with too many empty rooms since our children had grown and flown, seemed to welcome his quiet presence. Initially, it was easy. He mostly kept to himself, holed up in the guest room Mark had lovingly prepared, emerging only for meals or a hesitant conversation. I found myself leaving little trays of tea and biscuits outside his door, offering quiet words of encouragement when our paths crossed. It felt like a sisterly duty, a warmth born of empathy. But gradually, subtly, the dynamic shifted. Daniel started to emerge more. He'd offered to help in the garden, his strong hands surprisingly gentle as he pruned the rose bushes. He'd fixed the leaky faucet Mark had been meaning to get to for months. He'd even started making coffee in the mornings, the rich aroma drifting up to my bedroom, a silent, comforting start to the day. It wasn't just his helpfulness, though. It was the way he listened. Mark, bless his kind heart, was a talker. He'd come home from his law office, full of cases and anecdotes, and while I loved him dearly, our conversations often felt like monologues, with me playing the appreciative audience. Daniel, on the other hand, had a quiet intensity. When I spoke, he truly listened, his gaze steady, thoughtful. He'd ask follow-up questions, not out of politeness, but out of genuine curiosity. He saw things I thought no one else noticed. One evening, I was struggling with a particularly knotty problem at work, a complex financial report that refused to balance. Mark was out with friends, and I was hunched over my laptop, a mug of lukewarm tea forgotten beside me, a frown etched on my face. Daniel, passing by, paused at the study door. "Trouble?" he asked, his voice soft. I sighed. "Just this report. My brain feels like scrambled eggs. If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe." He stepped in, not invading my space, but settling onto the armchair opposite my desk. "Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes helps," he offered, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "Even if I don't understand the numbers, sometimes just talking it through can untangle the knots." I found myself explaining the convoluted data, my frustrations tumbling out. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer unsolicited advice. He just listened, his head tilted slightly, his eyes never leaving my face. And as I spoke, articulating the problem aloud, a solution, a tiny thread of clarity, began to emerge. "Wait," I murmured, my eyes widening. "What if I—" I typed furiously, the numbers clicking into place. A small gasp escaped me. "It worked! Daniel, it worked!" He chuckled, a warm, resonant sound. "Told you." His eyes were alight with a shared triumph, a spark that made my chest flutter. "You just needed to hear yourself think." "No," I corrected, a little breathless. "I needed you to listen." He held my gaze, and in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't just an intellectual connection. It was deeper, a whisper of understanding that transcended words. The air in the study thickened, charged with an unspoken acknowledgement. He rose then, his presence filling the small room, casting a long shadow over my desk. For a heartbeat, I thought he might touch me, might reach out and brush a stray strand of hair from my face. But he simply nodded, his smile softening, and then he was gone, leaving me alone with the hum of the computer and the startling echo of his presence. Days bled into weeks, and weeks into months. Mark remained oblivious, happy that his brother was doing so much better. He'd commend Daniel's helpfulness, often with a jovial clap on the shoulder. "Good man, my brother," he'd say, and I'd nod and smile, a knot of guilt beginning to tighten in my stomach. Because what was growing between Daniel and me felt far from good, though it felt intensely, terrifyingly real. The hot moments started to weave themselves into the fabric of our everyday lives. Daniel, fresh from a shower, would sometimes walk into the kitchen with only a towel riding low on his hips, his hair still damp, his skin dewy. He'd instantly apologize, grabbing a shirt, but in those fleeting seconds, my gaze would trace the strong line of his shoulders, the ripple of muscle in his back, the tanned expanse of his skin. A sudden rush of heat would flood my system, leaving me breathless and achingly aware of my own pulse. I'd busy myself with breakfast, my hands trembling slightly as I poured coffee, the image seared into my mind. He caught me watching him once, as he worked in the garden, shirtless again, muscles flexing with each swing of the spade. I was ostensibly pruning the rosemary, but my eyes kept drifting to the sheen of sweat on his back, the way his jeans clung to his hips. He straightened suddenly, turning, and our eyes met. He didn't smile, didn't look away immediately. His gaze held mine, direct and unwavering, a silent question in their depths. My cheeks burned, and I quickly ducked my head, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I felt exposed, seen in a way I hadn't been in years. Then there were the playful moments. One afternoon, we were baking a cake for Mark's birthday. We were laughing, flour dusting our clothes, when Daniel playfully flicked a dollop of batter onto my nose. I gasped, then retaliated, a tiny blob landing on his cheek. Soon, it escalated into a full-blown, flour-flinging, batter-splattering war. We were breathless, laughing, covered in white powder, when he cornered me against the counter, his hands bracing either side of my head, effectively trapping me. His face, streaked with flour, was inches from mine, his eyes sparkling with mischief. but beneath the laughter an intense current hummed. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the sweet scent of vanilla and his own clean, masculine musk. My chest rose and fell rapidly, not just from the exertion, but from the sudden, overwhelming proximity. For a long moment, our laughter died down, replaced by the sound of our ragged breathing. His gaze dropped to my lips, lingering there for a beat that felt like an eternity, before he finally straightened, a faint blush now coloring his own cheeks. "Ceasefire?" he whispered, his voice a little hoarse. I could only nod, my own voice trapped in my throat, my body tingling from the encounter. The lingering silences became even more potent. We'd be watching a movie late at night after Mark had gone to bed, or sitting on the porch swing as dusk settled. The quiet allowed for a shared intimacy, a feeling of being utterly comfortable and yet intensely aware of each other. Sometimes, our hands would rest on the armrest of the couch, inches apart. I'd feel the warmth radiating from his skin, a magnetic pull. I'd imagine reaching out, just for a moment, to touch him. And I knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me, that he felt it too. The air would thicken, charged with unspoken desires, the silence stretching taut between us, a delicate thread on the verge of snapping. The boundary finally, irrevocably blurred one rainy Tuesday evening. Mark was away on a business trip, leaving Daniel and me alone in the sprawling house. The storm outside raged, a symphony of drumming rain and gusting wind. We were in the living room, a fire crackling in the hearth, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill outside. We'd been talking, or rather, he'd been talking, pouring out his heart about his failing marriage, the pain in his voice raw and palpable. I listened, my heart aching for him, my hand instinctively reaching out to cover his where it rested on his knee. I don't know who I am anymore, he confessed, his voice breaking. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, filled with a vulnerability that stripped away all pretense. My thumb gently stroked the back of his hand, a purely comforting gesture at first. But then, as he continued to hold my gaze, as the storm howled outside, a different kind of warmth began to spread from our contact point, up my arm, through my chest. It wasn't just comfort anymore. It was connection, a deep, resonating understanding that transcended mere sympathy. He shifted, turning his hand over, his fingers lacing with mine. His grip was firm, electric. "Amelia," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his gaze dropping to my lips. The firelight danced in his eyes, reflecting a hunger that mirrored my own. My breath caught. The air in the room became impossibly heavy, charged with all the unspoken moments, all the lingering glances, all the suppressed desires that had been building between us. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat demanding release. I couldn't speak, could only meet his intense gaze, my own eyes probably reflecting the longing I had tried so desperately to bury. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he leaned closer. I felt the warmth of his breath on my face, smelled the earthy scent of him, mingled with the faint aroma of the wood smoke. It was intoxicating. And I, instead of pulling away, leaned in too, my body moving of its own volition, drawn by an irresistible force. His lips, soft and hesitant at first, met mine. It wasn't a forceful kiss, not demanding. It was a question, a gentle exploration, that deepened as I responded. A sigh escaped me, a sound of surrender, as my fingers tightened around his, and my other hand came up, almost instinctively, to cup his cheek, feeling the slight stubble beneath my palm. The world outside, the raging storm, the very fabric of my life, receded. There was only the fire's crackle, the soft rasp of our breathing, and the intoxicating press of his lips against mine, a tender, passionate unveiling of everything we had secretly felt. It was a kiss that tasted of forbidden fruit, of yearning, of sweet, devastating release. And in that kiss, I knew, with a terrifying clarity, that I had crossed a threshold from which there was no easy return. The aftermath was a confusing blur of guilt and exhilarating clarity. As he pulled away, his eyes still holding mine, a flush spread across his cheekbones. "Amelia," he breathed, his voice a low rumble, laced with both regret and something akin to wonder. I couldn't speak. My lips still tingled, my body still hummed with a profound awareness of him. We sat there, hands still intertwined, the silence now heavy with the weight of what we had done, what we had started. A betrayal. A secret. And yet, beneath the guilt, a strange, intoxicating sweetness bloomed, a sense of having finally, irrevocably, succumbed to a truth I had been fighting for months. From that night on, the house became a labyrinth of unspoken understandings and furtive glances. Every time Daniel and I were in the same room, there was an invisible thread connecting us, a crackle in the air that only we could perceive. Mark's absence was now a different kind of freedom, a space for our secret affection to breathe. Our encounters were stolen moments, brief but intense. A touch of his hand on my lower back as I bent to retrieve something from the fridge, a touch that lingered, sending a shiver through me. His arm brushing mine as we walked past each other in the hallway, a casual contact that felt anything but. His eyes would find mine across the dinner table, a silent conversation passing between us, a shared secret that made my heart race and my breath catch. One afternoon, I was folding laundry, lost in thought, when Daniel appeared in the doorway of the utility room. He didn't say anything, just leaned against the frame, watching me. The silence was not empty, it was laden with unspoken desire. The scent of fresh linen mingled with his subtle masculine aroma, wrapping around me. I felt my cheeks flush, my movements becoming a little less fluid, a little more self-conscious under his steady gaze. "You're beautiful, Amelia," he said, his voice a low whisper that seemed to caress the air. My hands stilled, a half-folded shirt clutched in my grasp. I looked up, unable to meet his eyes for more than a fleeting second. The raw honesty in his voice, the quiet intensity of his gaze, undid me. My throat tightened. I felt a yearning so profound it was almost painful. This man, my husband's brother, saw me. Truly saw me. He walked over, slowly, deliberately. Each step a measured beat, drawing closer. He stopped just in front of me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. He didn't touch me, not yet, but his presence alone was an embrace. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray piece of lint from my sweater. The contact was feather-light, yet it sent a jolt through me, a familiar electric current. "You deserve to be happy," he whispered, his voice hoarse, his gaze fixed on my eyes, seeking, searching. My own eyes, I knew, were probably brimming. A wave of emotions crashed over me, confusion, longing, guilt, and a profound, aching tenderness. He was so close I could feel his breath on my face. The scent of him filled my senses. My body yearned, and ached deep within me for something I hadn't realized I was missing until now. His hands, warm and strong, came up to cup my face, his thumbs gently stroking my cheekbones. His eyes held mine, full of a deep, complicated emotion that mirrored my own. Then, slowly, infinitesimally, he leaned in. My eyes fluttered shut, my lips parting slightly in anticipation. His mouth descended, not with force, but with a seeking softness that melted away all my reservations. It was a kiss that promised solace, understanding, and a shattering intimacy. It spoke of shared longing, of a secret world we had created, just for us. It was a surrender. Our secret affection blossomed in the quiet corners of the house, bathed in the soft glow of twilight or the hushed stillness of dawn. We cultivated a routine of almost accidental meetings, an extra-long chat over coffee in the mornings, lingering in the garden as darkness fell, late-night discussions in the living room after Mark had retired. Each interaction was laced with a delicious tension, a delicate dance of restraint and desire. One evening, Mark was out at a conference, and the house felt vast and empty. Daniel and I had dinner together, the conversation flowing easily, but beneath the surface, a new kind of current hummed. After we cleared the table, he suggested a movie. We settled onto the large, inviting sofa in the living room, the muted glow of the screen illuminating our faces. As the movie played, his arm, seemingly casually, stretched along the back of the sofa, his fingers brushing against my hair. A shiver traced its way down my spine. The warmth emanating from him was a silent invitation. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I leaned closer, my head resting lightly against his shoulder. He shifted, his arm now subtly embracing me, drawing me gently into the curve of his body. My heart pounded a slow, steady rhythm. The movie faded into the background, becoming a mere backdrop to the heightened reality of our closeness. I could feel the solid breadth of his chest against my back, the soft rise and fall of his breathing. The scent of him, clean and masculine, filled my nostrils, intoxicating me. His fingers, initially still, began to gently toy with the loose strands of my hair at my temple, a soft, rhythmic stroking that sent waves of sensation through me. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to melt into his embrace. It felt safe, yet wildly dangerous. My hand, almost unconsciously, reached back and found his, intertwining our fingers. His grip tightened, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that bound us. He leaned his head down, his lips brushing against my ear. "Amelia," he whispered, his voice a husky murmur that sent a thrill through me. "You feel right." My breath hitched. The simple words, delivered with such raw sincerity, pierced through my carefully constructed defenses. A profound ache settled in my chest, a yearning for this feeling, this sense of being utterly seen and cherished. I turned my head slightly, my lips brushing against his jawline. The warmth of his skin, the faint stubble, was an exquisite sensation. "Daniel," I whispered back, my voice trembling with the weight of my emotions. He turned his head fully then, his lips finding mine in the soft, diffused light of the living room. It was a kiss that started gently, a tender exploration, but quickly deepened into something fervent, desperate. My hands moved to cup his face, my fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. Our bodies pressed together, a silent symphony of yearning. Every touch, every breath, every silent plea was magnified, making the world shrink down to just us, caught in the intoxicating bubble of our shared desire. It was a surrender, an unraveling of all the rules, all the boundaries. The passionate, tender intimacy that followed was born from that shared whisper, from the storm within and without. It was not loud or demanding, but a quiet, fervent communion. In the hushed stillness of the house, cloaked by the absence of another, we found a language spoken only through touch, through lingering glances, through the soft sighs that escaped our lips. His hands, so gentle yet so powerful, traced the lines of my back, drawing me closer still, until there was no space left between us. My fingers found purchase on his shoulders, feeling the firm landscape of muscle beneath the soft fabric of his shirt. He leaned his forehead against mine, his eyes closed, his breathing ragged. The air was thick with unspoken words, with a profound tenderness that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. In that closeness, in the soft press of our bodies, in the shared breath that mingled between us, there was an honesty, a raw vulnerability that transcended any words. It was a complete surrender to the moment, to the magnetic pull that had grown between us, defying all reason and expectation. The entire house seemed to hum with the energy of our secret, a profound intimacy that was both a sweet solace and a harbinger of inevitable turmoil. My heart ached with the tenderness of it all, with the profound connection I felt, even as the cold tendrils of guilt began to wrap around me, reminding me of the life I was shattering, the husband I was betraying. We stayed like that for a long time, held in a fragile bubble of emotional and physical closeness. Every nerve ending in my body felt alive, humming with a desire that was intensely emotional, deeply satisfying, and utterly, irrevocably damaging. His touch, the lingering scent of him on my skin, the shared silence, all etched themselves onto my soul. When he finally pulled away, his eyes, dark and heavy with emotion, met mine. There was a profound sorrow there, a deep regret, but also an undeniable truth, a truth that had taken root between us, a sweet, dangerous poison. The silence that followed was agonizing, pregnant with the weight of our shared secret. He gently kissed my forehead, a tender, heartbreaking gesture that felt like both a blessing and a curse. He rose then, his movements slow, burdened. As he left the room, leaving me alone with the dying embers of the fire and the echoes of our intimacy, I felt a chasm open inside me. I was caught, inextricably tangled in a web of admiration, secrecy, and betrayal. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, but one thing was terrifyingly clear: the quiet, gentle hum that had started in my fingertips had now erupted into a roaring tempest, threatening to consume everything in its wake, leaving behind a world changed forever, and a heart forever marked by the illicit, undeniable tenderness of Daniel's touch. The sweet twist, I realized, was that this wasn't just physical, it was soul-deep. And that made the betrayal all the more excruciating. Make sure to like and subscribe to help push more of our contents.